I co-founded the Institute for Social Ecology in 1974 with Murray Bookchin. Murray was a very early advocate of alternative technologies, really going back to the 60s. We organized a conference before we formally began the Institute. We organized a conference in 1973 at Goddard College, and we brought a whole group of people who were really pioneers in the field of alternative energy, alternative technology, AT as we called it back then, to discuss these emerging ideas and how they were finding application in different kinds of communities around the country. So we had people like Carl Hess there, who was working with AT in the Adams Morgan neighborhood in Washington, D.C., a dense kind of urban quasi-ghetto setting. We had people who were working with solar energy in rural New Mexico come to the conference. And it generated a lot of interest, and we began to think about how some of these technologies might have application in Vermont. So when we began the Institute in 1974, we were initially based at Goddard College, and our approach to learning was one that emphasized both theoretical understanding, work in the classroom, and hands-on experience. And we were very interested in seeing how some of these technologies might play a role in the kind of broader social reconstruction that social ecology envisioned. For us, the big appeal of AT was that it did lend itself to community control, and what we envisioned was not centralized solar plants producing electricity that would go out over high tension lines all over the country, but rather a mosaic of humanly scaled technologies that could be used at the level of the homestead, the community, or the urban neighborhood. And it seemed to us that that was the real potential that these technologies held, and that was the basis on which we did our work. In 1975, the college turned over a 90-acre farm, Cape Farm, to the Institute for us to use as an educational center, a demonstration site, and an experimental lab, really. We built a whole series of demonstration projects on the site and opened it up to the public. And it was, I think, for a lot of people in Vermont, really their first introduction to alternative technologies. We built what I'm quite sure was Vermont's first passive solar greenhouse, which was bermed into a hillside. And we actually designed that greenhouse so that it could operate through the winter without any external energy source. We had a compost pile in there that generated some heat. It was extremely well insulated, triple glazed, an airtight seal. We constructed what I believe was the first solar building in Vermont on the Goddard campus, a greenhouse structure that incorporated a passive solar first story and a second story with an active trickle plate collector where we heated water that we stored in a large precast concrete septic tank. And it's very simple by today's standards. We weren't using photovoltaics to generate electricity. We were just heating water and using that as a form of thermal energy to heat the buildings. And we used that to provide heat for the greenhouse and tried in all of our attempts at utilizing these technologies to really integrate different techniques together so that the greenhouse served to grow vegetables and edibles, and we used scrap from those edibles to feed fish that we were raising in the warm water in the fish tanks as well. And, when we began, people were very skeptical. I mean, they absolutely laughed at us. Oh, solar energy in Vermont can never happen. We don't have enough sun. It's too cold here, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, we know today that solar energy has application almost everywhere. That the key to thermal efficiency and using solar energy for heating in Vermont is beginning with a tight, well-insulated building, which was something else that we emphasized. We also built, with the help of a group called Charas, who were a Puerto Rican community development group that we worked with in New York City, helped us build a large cow wall dome. In that dome, served also as a greenhouse and as a place to grow fish. We used a biofiltration system to clean the water. For that system, we actually used a sail wing windmill that we built to circulate the water in that greenhouse. But we did integrate into those systems the use of solar energy at a time when really virtually no one else, certainly in Vermont, was doing it. And we also reintroduced wind power to Vermont. And I say reintroduced because people may be aware that in the 30s there was a large commercial-scale wind generator built on Grandpa's Knob down in Rutland, right outside of Rutland. It blew apart in a high wind, I guess 3 or 4 weeks after it went into operation. But we had actually sent a team of students with a professor out to the Midwest, and they brought up a bunch of these old Jacobs wind generators, 1,800-watt wind generators that had been used for on-farm electrification in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then with rural electrification, of course, fell into disuse. So people went from farm to farm, and they dragged these old things out of the barns and brought them back to Vermont. We had a class where they learned how to rebuild them, and we put up a Jacobs windmill at Kate Farm. 1,800 watts is not a whole lot of energy, but it provided lights for the greenhouse, and I think we pumped some water with the electricity as well. We also built a sail wing windmill, which was based on the model, a model that had been developed by the New Alchemy Institute. And we rehabbed an old prairie fan as well, which we used for pumping water from a shallow well into a storage tank. So all in all, the Kate Farm site really did serve a wonderful purpose as a demonstration site for the technologies, and it attracted a steady stream of visitors. I mean, people came literally from all over the world to see what we were doing. And we were written up in several books, and every few weeks somebody would, "Oh, hi, I'm from Denmark. I saw your operation in a book, and I wanted to come visit." There was quite a bit of interest in Vermont. We saw visitors from various community action agencies came around. We ended up doing some work with the Central Vermont Community Action Agency. The project continued for a number of years until the college decided to sell Kate Farm in 1981. And at that point we vacated it, and it's now a commercial organic farm. And I think were you to go there today, you would see very little remaining of the work that we did there. But it did have an impact, and it was important. It served as a wonderful teaching tool for the students. It inspired others in the area to pursue these technologies. And I think most importantly, it showed Vermonters that in fact solar energy was practical. Wind power did work in Vermont.